Hi, y'all. We are a couple seconds late because I wasn't paying a ton of attention, and Sarenth is still opening his bottle of. What are you opening?
It is me by Detroit Vineyards.
Hmm.
Yeah, I saw this at my local liquor store. Shout out to Ron if he sees this. And I said, you know what? I got to try that.
Let me see the bottle.
Hang on.
No. Ooh, Motor City Mead, Detroit Vineyards. What's
Come on,
the style?
autofocus, you lousy bastard. What's the what?
What's the style?
It's 2018 Rye Barrel Sizer.
Ooh, Rye Barrel Sizer.
Yeah.
I bet that's interesting.
Yes, I would hope so. There we go. I can see a little better now. I'm not completely washed out. So, yeah, it smells amazing, and it is apple honey wine. So I'm really looking forward to it.
That's what Sizer means. Is
That's
apple.
right. That's right.
No, you're fine. I'm also saying that out loud for people who aren't familiar because I am encyclopedic with my knowledge of this, but that doesn't mean everyone else is.
Yeah.
And we have Emily and Jason in the chat already. Hey, y'all. Jason, thank you for this wine. It is amazing.
Save a taste for me. I will.
I am drinking.
Actually, if you want.
Did not bring the bottle with me, but I am drinking Dionysos by I don't remember who. It's a Greek wine that Jason got me as a housewarming gift, and it is probably. We're gonna see how this glass goes, but so far it is my new favorite wine. The same company makes a Hermes wine as well that is also very good, but is not quite as much my style. Because it's much drier. It's much more Jason's style, I think. But this is a Merlot. It is big and fruity and bold and really quite good. It's also not it's not very sweet for a Merlot. It's got that kind of drying aftertaste that's very pleasant.
Gotcha. Just to check in, folks can see the broadcast, the video broadcast, right?
I hope so. We've got 6 viewers, so
yeah. Actually, I can view it on YouTube. Just to double check.
Jason says correct. We can see the broadcast. So
okay, good. I was just checking it because Josie was like, "Hey, I can see the chat, but not the video." Oh. Which it's Josie and it's Mercury retrograde, so I'm shocked.
That also might have been
just prior to launch then.
Yeah, might have been. Josie, if you still can't see it, please let us know. Also, hey, Caitlin, and hey, Finn, nice to see you.
Holy shit, it's Finn.
Yeah.
Congrats on the car ride home.
Yep. Be safe and all that. Finn will be driving for most of the broadcast, so.
Rock on.
Cool.
So before we get too far underway.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to really quick make some offerings.
Please.
To our gods of wisdom. Oh, you know what? Let me start this off right. Hail, sons and daughters of Muspelheim, hellfire itself. Hail, eldest ancestor. Hail, Mikkel Elder Vetor, Hail Elder Vetor. Hail, Suna, Hail Loki, Hail Glut, Hail Logi, Hail Surt, Hail Sinmora. Hail, holy ones. Hail, Mikkel Elder Vetor, Hail Elder Vetor. Rest to Hail. I thank you, O blessed fire, for cleansing me within and without, for cleansing the space between us, for cleansing all these gathered drinks and making them good and holy, and offering to the holy powers, the Ginregen. And now, I offer this mead to our gods of wisdom, to Kvasir, to Othin, to Frigg, to Angarbotha, to Loki, to the holy ones who have suffered for wisdom, to the holy ones who have worked for wisdom, to the holy ones who are wisdom. To the Desir, the Fedrar, the Ergi, the Thaver, the ancestors, the powerful ancestors who are the wisdom of our lines, and to the Vetir who share their wisdom with us. Hail to you all, and Vestu Heil. Go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm being moved. Give me a minute.
Yep. Reminds me of a song from the early aughts.
Hail to the mystery keepers and carriers, those with wisdom in their blood and veins and bones, who sought and died for wisdom to pass on. Things beyond words, things that can only be experienced, things that are taught with words anyway. Hail to the mystery keepers, beyond the veil, who teach us despite death. Thank you for your wisdom. Please be with us tonight. Let us speak well. Let us not mislead. We speak of important things. Pack warm us and keep us all. Bless the wild. Every time I'm crying on it. It's fun.
It's all good.
I should just expect it at this point.
Yeah, pretty much. The other one that I'll be drinking tonight is Old Slavic mead. It's Medivina, dark forest honey. This is a Slovakian import mead.
It's pretty solid.
Mm-hmm.
I like your stuff.
Yeah, go for it.
It's not my favorite, but it's definitely solid stuff, I would say.
Ooh, I agree.
Jason is drinking ginger beer and Irish whiskey, and also, yes, Josie, it's fine. Take a shot. I'm already drinking, so we're just going to call that good.
If any of you wish to have liver failure, keep taking shots after that.
Yeah.
Treat it, it's all good, or it's fine, as a drinking game at your peril.
Yeah, that would end either very well or very poorly.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the theme for tonight is theology and terminology, and we're gonna. Sarenth, you want to start with us going over some terminology that we were kind of asked to go over?
Yes. Honestly, I find it so much easier to start from a shared. There we go. Shared lexicon. Mm-hmm. So most of our initial stuff is going to be taken from edamonline.com. So if folks want to follow along at home, that is where we're going to be taking our information from.
Yes. I will say, unfortunately, the one I want to start with is for Jason. And it's, I do not have good news for you, my friend. From Oxford Dictionary definition for warlock, or etymology for warlock, we have Old English werloga, I believe.
Yes.
Is how that's pronounced. Traitor, scoundrel, monster, also the devil. From were, covenant, plus an element related to leogon, to belie or deny. From its application to the devil, the word was transferred in Middle English to a person in league with the devil, and hence a sorcerer. It was chiefly Scots until given wider currency by Sir Walter Scott. I had thought for quite some time that warlock meant oathbreaker in terms of like severing, cutting things. But it turns out rather it means something more along the lines of oathbreaker as one who denies things said. And the aligning with the devil would then be denying the covenant of the Christian covenant, things like that. So I bought into probably incorrect etymologies at some point because pop etymology is often terrible. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that seems to be where warlock is coming from, and not the much more fun etymology of oathbreaker as like cut, like oath cutting type deal.
Yeah.
That would honestly
Basically, it's like you're not worthy of being considered somebody who can make oaths in the first place.
yeah. Or someone who has when it at least hit popular usage from Scots, it was sorcerer in the sense of like, oh, you're conspiring with the devil, which, hey, like, don't get me wrong, I'm all for transgressive doing deals at the crossroads or whatever you got to do, but also probably not the way that Jason was thinking about it, which was like a fate cord severing type deal.
Right. It's worth pointing out that Var, or the Varar, which is Old Norse, is related to one of Frigg's handmaidens, whose basic idea is that she oversees oaths, and that the Leogan, which is the Old English Wordloga, which is deceiver liar, basically this is somebody who would look in the god's face and lie to them. So not good.
Yeah, unfortunately. I really like the pop etymology better. It's a lot more fun, but it's not what it is. So, that's why we just make new words, honestly. Anyway, other things that I wanted to define for the night, because these are always things that I want to talk about. God, the etymology of the word God comes from Old English God, supreme being, deity, the Christian God, image of a god, godlike person. From Proto-Germanic Guthon, source of Old Saxon, Old Frisian, Dutch God, Old High German goat, German goat, Old Norse Guth, Gothic Guth, I believe is how that would be pronounced. Gothic always trips me up. Which is of uncertain.
Or gout.
I don't think that's how.
Etymologically, it would be like to Gautier, which is god of the Gauts, or Goths.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, that might be
would
it.
Etymologically also be related to things like that, because like etymology is fucky after a bit.
Yeah. But these are of uncertain origin. Perhaps Proto-Indo-European gut, that which is invoked. Source also of an Old Church Slavonic zovo, to call, or Sanskrit huta, invoked. An epithet of Indra, actually, from a root that would translate now to call or invoke. The notion could be divine entity summoned to a sacrifice. Some, however, trace it to Proto-Indo-European gutu, poured from the root gu, actually, I think, to pour or to pour a libation. Potentially also related to a Greek term, poured earth, referring to a burial mound. There's a quote in here, given the Greek facts, the Germanic form may have referred in the first instance to the spirit immanent in a burial mound.
Yep.
In either case, not related to good. Seeing pop etymology, good and God do not come from the same etymological root. Interestingly, originally a neuter noun in Germanic, the gender shifted to masculine after the coming of Christianity. English God probably was closer in sense to Latin numen. A better word to translate deus might have been Proto-Germanic onsus. But this was used only of the highest deities in the Germanic religion and not of foreign gods, and it was never used of the Christian God. It survives in English mainly in personal names beginning in os. So yeah, etymology of the word God is very complicated, but probably comes from either that which is invoked or pouring out libations, potentially also burial mound stuff. Which the word spirit is in basically no way related to the word God, and refers to the etymology is also complicated. Basically, comes from Latin, meaning breath, roughly, um, and then kind of later transformed into meaning disembodied thing or a spirit that would be inherent to a person or to supernatural beings. Oh, good. Sarenth
Yes,
is
I just
all of our sources into
threw
the thing.
over, yeah. So all
Yeah,
the sources we're going to use for this particular broadcast.
yeah. But yeah. Also, interestingly, Sarenth and I actually did a bunch of on a video call. We did a bunch of research on etymologies and stuff. Soul seems to have primarily etymologies related to seas or lakes, bodies of water, which is really fascinating. Given how many cultures from unrelated language groups have water related to passage of souls or afterlives, which I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, the passage of souls and various gods and beings through, for instance, the solar bark of, um, pardon me, Ra, or the various ship burials in Norway, the existence of Ran and Aegir,
Mm-hmm.
so on and
In
so forth.
Old Norse, also in Turkic language families, in a lot of Tengris traditions, the River of Souls flows to the underworld, is kind of sort of a Axis Mundi. That gets a
Right.
little complicated. But yeah, the River of Souls is a thing that flows to the underworld and carries everyone on death to the underworld, at least part of your soul, because they have a multi-soul complex as well. But yeah, so that's a few etymologies to work with to start. What did you want to cover as far as definitions and stuff?
Oh, I mean, the thing that I really wanted to cover was like getting a basic throughput of what we're talking about and how. So a lot of the conversation we've already had, um, basically giving everybody kind of an equal footing on which to kind of put their feet up and be like, all right, so this is what we're actually talking about. And I think it's important to note that you and I are primarily speaking out of a heathen, or at least a heathen informed lens.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I am a Kemetic priest. However, I'm an independent Kemetic priest, and most of my Kemetic stuff has been on the back burner for a lot of years.
Just discussion.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that my time with Anpu is over. It just means that honestly, most of my work with him is completely on the back burner. Like, so yeah. Uh, some of this stuff I had to look back up again because it's been long enough that I didn't remember all this stuff about the Kemetic soul. It's worth pointing out that generally speaking, if you've got a polytheist society, you have some kind of soul complex. Yeah, I know. Famous last fucking words. Thank you, Emily. Anyway, most polytheist and many, if not every animist that I've come across, animist religion, whether current or historical, has some kind of soul complex because the soul isn't just something that's body bound.
Mm-hmm.
There's different interpretations of how the soul unfolds, and how married or not married it is to your physical form it depends on what particular religion at what particular point in time you're looking at it.
No.
And it also depends on whether or not the culture in question has gone through colonization and how that has affected how they see the soul at that point.
Yep. And this actually kind of gets into a thing that Snow brought up as a topic is plurality as a topic in theology, and the fact that as soon as plurality of gods and or spirits becomes a thing, plurality bleeds its way into everything. Why would I be singular? Not in the sense of like DID or the plural community, but rather why would my, although that's another whole thing.
That I am not prepared at this moment in time to jump into.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm intentionally setting to the side because it's a complicated topic that I am not informed enough to speak on.
Oh, that citrus really fucking good. You gotta try this sometime. Sorry. Anyway,
no, you're fine. No, like you're good. I would like to try that. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, so we're setting that to the side, not because it's not an important topic, but because neither of us are informed enough to speak on it well.
We know folks who are systems, but I can't speak to the experience of being a system, and I wouldn't be equipped right now to try.
Yeah.
That is to say, just really quick, I'm sorry to jump in again, but they are valid expressions of personhood and understanding of oneself and one's system. Again, just not something I can speak to.
Yeah. I've had experiences that I would say are edging into that territory, but are not. It's not a thing that I am comfortable talking on.
And that's legit.
Yeah. So, and certainly I'm not part of the community, and I wouldn't be comfortable, even if I was very comfortable talking about those experiences on air. I wouldn't be comfortable talking for the community in anything like that. So intentionally setting that to the side. It's still when you understand, when you are coming from a framework that is inherently plural, understanding yourself as singular as an individual becomes significantly harder, right? Think of the heathen soul map, right? Most and we're just using this as an example. This will apply to a lot of other systems. It certainly won't be one-to-one, but it may or may not apply super well. But thinking of the heathen soul map, most soul maps that I have seen include Hamingia or Orlog, or most include both. And these are things that are inherited. They aren't just yours, right? Orlog literally isn't you. Like, it's you, but it's all of the things that came before you. It's not a thing you have any control over. It's the actions of your ancestors. It's
real quick etymology plug. The term Orlog means law, like old law. This is the shit that you had like no personal input on how it was set down before you got here.
Yeah, it's that which was laid down before. Hamingia is often translated as luck, but it's not. That's a hard thing to translate well. It's kind of,
see our previous episode with Jason.
Yeah. Actually Jason's episode on AGF goes over it pretty well. It's an inherited family thing. It's kind of your ability to get shit done despite all odds, right? When things.
And funny enough, in a lot of sources, Hamingia is also externalized as an external spirit. So it's not just something that's inside of you; it's also external to you.
And
so this is where the soul, in general, gets really fucky.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of the thing that I'm getting at, is that these are not in the traditional Western sense a soul, right? These are things that are external to you.
I want to correct that really quick. This is not a traditional Western worldview. The problem we're encountering is a specifically traditional Christian worldview, not Western.
That's fair.
Because Christianity in this regard is the complete outlier.
Yeah. And I should say modern Western is probably more accurate there. Like, I appreciate the correction, genuinely.
It's just because, like, when you look at the history of like the identity of the soul, I actually have in the link section, I have the Stoic, and I believe I have a Platonic. Yes. So I got Platonic and Stoic, I think, in there. I can't recall. It's in it. Oh, yep, here it is. Yeah.
There's there. Yeah.
So there are two different versions of understanding within Greek thought, and those are fucking ancient, and they are still a plurality of a person, not so much paperwork and translation errors. Yes.
But yeah, the idea though that a thing that is not like inherent to me can still be a part of me in a very real and visceral way
Mm-hmm.
speaks to plurality, and it speaks to I'm going to get into kind of my background with English crit theory here. English crit theory being English critical theory, which is how English departments function, which is like critical frameworks that you use to analyze text. I'm being like overly explicit because I don't want to lose people in terminology, because that's really easy to do as soon as we start talking about things like this, right?
Well, I mean, you're talking about ultra specialized language, which is used to pick apart transcripts.
Exactly. And in particular, a lot of my background is in post-structuralism, postmodernism, and particularly in deconstruction, which came out of Derrida's work. I'm not going to get
Which
into
is
a
an
ton
entire
of that.
philosophical branch.
Yeah, that's right. That's a whole fucking thing that isn't really what we're talking about, but it's the salient point is that, wow, I didn't eat dinner. That's why I'm tipsy. Okay. I was like, why am I
Jesus
more tipsy
fucking
than I
Christ.
should have been? I've only had like a few ounces. I didn't eat. I'm drinking on an empty stomach. That's fine. It'll
Please
just make
get a
things.
glass of water.
I will in a bit.
I'm gonna hop off your point here.
Mhm.
Something funny was an ancient idea was that you should be able to debate an idea sober and drunk
Yep.
in order to keep it.
Yep. That's actually there's a Jewish idea that you should debate an idea 3 times, sober, drunk, and then sober again, just to see if it
Nice.
stands up, right?
See,
I
that's even better.
particularly like that. And yeah, as Jason says, it is also a strong Merlot, to be fair. But yeah, eat before you drink, folks. It's better for you. I genuinely should not be doing this. I am, because we're on air and I don't want to get up, but it'll be fine. So one of the ideas kind of incumbent to structuralism and then post-structuralism is that the language you speak shapes your psychology and how you see the world, right? The words that you use to describe the things around you matter. They shape how you see things. I've talked so much around it that I forgot what my original point I was
So
driving
your
at.
original point that you were driving at is with English critical theory and its function.
Right. It was plurality. We are raised in such a cultural milieu where the soul is a singular thing that it becomes very difficult for us to think in a plural way, right? Especially in America, our society is so individualist, and that is reflected in our language. I don't have an example right off the bat, but like it's reflected.
Overemphasis on I.
Overemphasis on I, right? Yeah, it's so inherent in our culture and our language that it affects our thought patterns, and it becomes really difficult for us to conceptualize of things of plurality, and that affects both our day-to-day practice and our theology, in kind of how we approach these things. And I think that's a thing that's worth deconstructing and working to undo, both on a personal level, because like it affects how I see the world and my relationships, and if we want to get out of the hyper capitalist hellscape that we're in, we're going to need community. And also because the gods that I follow are plural, and therefore I need to undo that in order to follow them well.
It's worth pointing out that the original etymology for a lot of the words we're talking about were understood in distinctive ways depending on what you're talking about being translated and how it would have applied to that particular culture. But what we can say in general is that the notion of the soul as a plural system is not only ancient, it's founded in almost every single notion, even ancient Christianity, which took a difference between spiritus, that is the spirit connected to the breath, and the pneuma, or the soul, as we've come to know it now, which is like your immortal soul, which is hilarious because fucking pneuma in Greek is related to breath.
Right. Yeah.
So both the Latin and the Latinized understanding of the Greek relates directly to being breathed into.
Yeah. And it's also interesting, the numen in the Latin, speaking in the Latin, the numen being distinct from the breath is interesting because it does point to there being two things, right? The kind of animating spirit, the thing that gives you life, and then something beyond that.
So in the ways we're talking, pneuma as a breath soul is Pneuma, whereas the numinous soul is Numen. And it sounds very fucking similar, and there are very different implications to them.
Yep, there are. And the pneuma is Greek and is actually closer to spiritus in Latin, where numen is Latin and is probably Latinized Greek and is.
And it's complicated. The way that it is used now is the numinous soul. And the way that most people use the understanding of numen, when they say soul, what they mean is that immortal thing that's behind the mind doing its thing. It's the thing that drives your flesh vehicle.
Yeah.
So if we say something is numinous, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. The spiritual, the thing beyond, the kind of relating back to the prayer that I was moved to earlier, the thing that can only be experienced, not explained.
Yeah. This is part of why when we started thinking about this episode, I was like, we've got to have definitions because this shit gets complicated so very quickly, and we can't accurately speak to every worldview because we don't hold every worldview.
Yep.
But because we hold a plurality worldview, there is the possibility that all are correct.
Yes.
The possibility I will hold and maintain that there's also the paradox of intolerance here.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that there is. I would even. There are many correct ways. There are many correct theologies, even ones that seem contradictory.
Sure.
Because plurality is a thing. However, I would also say that there are incorrect theologies, which are those theologies which cannot stand up to their own examination.
Sure.
Which is also funny that I am saying that because under deconstruction, nothing stands up to its own examination, but that's a whole other thing, and we're going to ignore that and just understand that I acknowledge I am being a little hypocritical here.
Can I just say fuck Derrida?
I mean, absolutely. I say that repeatedly. I'm still a fanboy. It's fine.
Good for you.
I genuinely I put Derrida in the same camp, and honestly, increasingly, I am kind of in the camp that deconstruction and existentialism go hand in hand. I put Nietzsche and Derrida into the same boat where they're poorly understood by most of the people who read them.
Yep.
And they're used even more poorly by most of those people as cudgels, and it's very bad. And those people don't understand what they're reading. And
somebody has to be. You're not wrong, Josie.
Yeah. And genuinely though, like as much as like, yeah, genuinely fuck Derrida. And honestly, I think it's funny because I think Derrida would probably agree with you. Mm-hmm. I think these are very useful tools, much like Nietzsche and existentialism. I think they're very useful.
Right. Tools. Oh, I can get. Oh, yeah. Don't get me started. Oh, he's so. Yes. Just yes. Everything that you just said. Yes. Apply that to Nietzsche because I really enjoy him. and he is so fucking misused and misunderstood.
Well, and that's the thing with a lot of these things, right? Like existentialism, yeah, it can lead you into a deep, deep depression, and that's the thing that I think anyone who fucks with existential philosophy will deal with.
He absolutely comes right out of the woodwork and says immediately, if you just read any of his fucking texts.
Yeah.
Beyond sound bites, like if you actually like sit and read the thing, he's like, yeah, you are going to be driven to despair. This point of this philosophical exercise is to get you beyond that.
Yeah. And deconstruction ends up in much the same place where you if you do it correctly, and I'm using these words, the word is faith for a reason. Exactly.
Yes.
And I'm speaking, I'm saying the things that I say for a reason, and I understand what I understand that I understand what I'm doing when I'm saying this. Please, for those who are familiar with deconstruction, please understand I know what I'm saying when I'm saying this. If you're using deconstruction correctly, you end up deconstructing everything and you live in a wasteland. And then you say, okay, what the fuck do I do from here? And what you do from there is you build what you want. You build the things that make you happy, right? And this is why I put deconstruction in the same boat as existentialism, because the point isn't it's a wasteland. The point is you do fucking something with it, right?
Well, this is why I think that Othin is an excellent example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because what does he and his brothers do when they're like, well, this is shit. We're all stuck here in Niflheim. They kill their oppressor and use him as parts to make their own fucking world. He's actually kind of an amazing analog to existentialist philosophy in action.
Yeah.
Because you've got inspiration and frenzy, will and the sacred.
Yeah.
Making something out of the screamer.
Yeah. That is a good reading of that myth, I think. I think that is a good reading of that myth. That is not the one that I tend towards, but that does not mean that it's not useful. Which also comes back to, frankly, the theology of mythology, right?
Right.
What are myths? What do they do? And for me, for how I use them, they are texts that tell us things about the divine.
Right.
And that's it.
Some of them are just so stories.
Yeah, some of them are just they're stories, and stories are meant for entertainment. Every story ever, in my opinion, as a writer, as a reader, is meant for entertainment.
Sure.
In some capacity. Whether that it's its main purpose or not, you have to entertain the reader enough that they will continue reading. But once you get past that, what is the message of the story? Well, it tells you something about the divine, and that's it.
Right.
And then,
what is a myth? It contains something
of the divine.
Of the divine. Yeah.
And then from there you go into interpretation. Okay, cool. What is this myth telling us? And then you get into kind of like cool. Well, how do you interpret things? Well, what are you looking for? You're looking for how does this explain the gods, their relationships with each other?
How do I relate?
Yeah, it's how do they relate with each other? What are they in charge of, with big quotes there, and how do I relate to them?
Right.
That's what mythology is for.
So the point of analyzing your myths and understanding why you hold the theological worldview you do isn't just for a philosophical exercise, which is a fine and dandy thing on its own. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But it's because these form the ground of your Weltanschauung, your worldview. And this is the thing that you think about the world before you even think. This is how you construct reality in your head going forward from point A to point B. Or at the very least, if you're not constructing it, you're living it.
Yeah. Yeah. To use a modern psychology term, the schema that you are using, the map of ideas which you use to navigate the world.
Yep. And so talking about theology and terminology is utterly important to the project of religion in general, because how you use the words, what you use them for, and in what direction you use those words fucking matters, which is why I've got such a hard on for Old Norse as a language that I mine, because there are depths to using a word like skoga for forest
Mm-hmm.
because it carries weight to it that English forest just doesn't. When I say skogvitir, what I'm not doing is I'm not fetishizing Old Norse. I am relating to the things that live in that forest in a very particular way.
And while I acknowledge that that is good and valuable for you, not at all for me.
Right. No,
Like,
and I think that relating is a personal thing. As it
yeah,
can be, it can be also a communal thing, but it is a personal thing.
yeah. And like, if we were in ritual together and you were leading it and you used it, it would have meaning for me in that sense.
Sure, I would
But
probably have to explain it.
probably, but assuming that you had done your work beforehand and explained the words that you were using and why they were important, it would have meaning for me in that sense, and that would be meaningful for me. But again, back to that plurality thing, if the roles were reversed and I was leading the ritual, I would not use that because that doesn't have meaning for me personally.
Right.
And so I would use different words. I would use words in English because English is my mother tongue. That's how I speak. And that holds more meaning for me than Old Norse does.
So this is a thing that I've batted around with different Troth members and different folks otherwise, in that at the end of the day, the purpose of language is to communicate an idea. And if I have to explain the idea as I am trying to spin myth or trying to bring you into a ritual setting, I'm not going to use specialized language because it doesn't mean shit to you. I'm going to just use forest spirits because that's going to communicate the idea quickest and most effectively.
Mm-hmm. I think that there is value, though, in religious or ritual language, though.
Sure, but not if I'm having to every 5 seconds stop myself, explain the term, and then bring you along. Or if I explain it beforehand, but you're trying to figure out what the fuck Skogvatir are when you're supposed to have develop a relationship with them, or you're supposed to have an experience with them in the moment.
Yeah, no, and that's fair.
When ritual language becomes a stumbling block, that becomes a problem.
Yeah, and that's kind of the tricky fine line that you're walking with all of it, right?
Absolutely.
That's why I know at one point Catholic masses were given entirely in Latin.
Entirely, and Vatican II changed all that.
Yeah, and then they changed it. Why? Because the people who were listening didn't know what the fuck was going on.
Okay, here's the thing. If you were in the Catholic Church, either you took Latin classes as part of being in a Catholic high school at the time, or you would have gone to church long enough to have gotten the gist of it by that point. But they turned over to a Vulgate in part because they were losing membership.
Mm-hmm.
Which there's an entire political background to how Vatican II came around that's really fucky, and I have varying degrees of this was cool, this sucked. But one of the things that they changed also was the way the priest was situated. So instead of facing the altar and talking to God during the Mass, they put him behind the altar and he's facing a congregation.
And this gets to
religious ritual language.
Yes, and it also gets to role differences, right? So the article many months ago that I had you write for Patreon about defining various spiritual specialist roles, right? You define clergy and priests as different things.
Absolutely.
And priests are serving the gods or the divine, and clergy are serving the congregation, right? They're serving the community.
Yep.
And the same person, from what I remember from the post, the same person can fill both roles, but they are two different roles to your mind.
Yes. But by definition, we are often forced to wear the same. One person is forced to wear many hats, especially in our religious communities, and even in the Catholic community. Like a priest will also serve as clergy. Yep. But the purpose of a priest versus the purpose of a clergy person are entirely different in how they were originally constructed.
Yeah. And on the one hand, no definition is perfect. And also there are genuinely some things that I feel I would argue within some of your definitions, but again,
Sure.
reasonable people will disagree.
I fucking hope so.
Yeah, right. Me argue with you, never.
Not in a million. Real quick aside, I am now drinking what's Dragon's Milk Tales of Gold.
Ooh. Oh, they're
Yeah.
gold now.
Yeah, with milk sugar. Yeah, bourbon barrel aged.
How is it? I've been wanting to get my hands on that.
I haven't tried it yet.
Okay,
So
please tell me how it is. I have been really impressed. So what's the name of that?
Oh, that is fucking fabulous.
What's the name of that company again?
Dragon's Milk.
No. That's their subline. What's the company?
Oh fuck, I don't know.
Damn it! I gotta look this up. I genuinely need to.
I don't know. It says Dragon's Milk Cellar.
Hold on.
Oh, New Holland Brewing.
New Holland, thank you. So New Holland with their Dragon's Milk line, because it was originally just Dragon's Milk, which was just kind of their bourbon barrel aged stout. But they've been doing increasingly interesting things with it. And I'm super impressed with it.
We damn near picked up one of theirs that had chilies and cinnamon in it.
I've had that. It's very good. So that's this is genuinely pin in that. This is already shaping up to be one of my favorite Three Pots episodes, because it is absolutely what this podcast is supposed to be. We are talking about spiritual topics, but we're also drinking, and so it's just a mess of how the conversation flows. Pin out of that. So that is one of their Dragon's Milk Reserve, and the style of chilies, spices, chocolate, and stout is called a mole stout. And it is one of my favorite styles of stout out there. Very often they're barrel aged, not always, but very often. But yeah, it's because it's off of the Mexican mole sauces, which are like chili, spices, and often chocolate, if I'm remembering that correctly.
That sounds correct, yes.
But yeah, they're phenomenal. They're one of my favorite kinds of beer. And I will say that that Dragon's Milk is not the best expression of that style I've had, but it is really solid. And it's not overly spicy. I think you would enjoy it. But yeah, they've been doing a lot of really interesting things with it.
So I kind of want to bring this background back to. So much like you and I can, your palate with regards to drink in general is much more refined than mine is. I will pick up something like Tales of Gold and like, this is the best fucking shit since sliced bread, until I revise my opinion later on and find something that might be better than it. But you can speak from experience and are like, I have drunk this, that, and the other. Whereas I'm like, this tastes good. And neither one is wrong. It's just, it's the experience of whatever it is couched in the terms that I already have access to.
Yeah.
No, or don't.
Exactly. And that's kind of the thing, right? Like your and my experience as spiritual specialists who have intense and very regular intense experiences with the divine are no more important and no more meaningful than someone who has never done anything besides give offerings, has never had anything but a single experience, right? That these are no more important, these are no more significant, these are no more meaningful than someone who is a lay person, quote unquote, right?
Right.
Both of these things are just as valuable. They're just different jobs, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, it's different expressions of relationship with the gods. Some people are going to get flash traffic every time they open their eyes or shut their eyes. Some people are going to get nothing, and they'll have been the most pious followers of a god for the whole of their lives. It doesn't make them inherently better or worse. It might just be a matter of wiring.
Yeah. Or it could be a million different things, right? Like,
right. Which I said might, because I don't fucking know.
Right. These are questions that do not have definitive answers.
If somebody is offering to give you the definitive answer, fucking run.
Yeah. Right.
I say it as a diviner.
Yeah. They're full of shit, right? As a diviner, as a professional diviner, I can say that I have received money for doing divination. And No, I get things wrong sometimes. Like, that's the nature of being a diviner. Sometimes you will get things wrong.
And we're talking like theology and terminology here. Like, just because I use specialized language, it doesn't make me inherently better than somebody who only ever reads or speaks English.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that my rituals are inherently more effective or good or whatever because I'm using specialized language. It makes me feel good, folks.
Right.
It makes me feel a certain way when I use Skogvatir instead of forest spirits. It doesn't mean that it's inherently better. It just makes me feel it makes me feel mystical, or it makes me feel happy, or whatever. It doesn't mean that I'm. Well, I mean, this is also true. It just makes me inherently nerdier. This is also true. I love language. I love language, and I'm a theater geek. So if I can make it sound more dramatic, I'm going to. Like, I'll cop to that. I will totally cop to that. But for me, the performance of ritual and using specialized language, and sometimes putting myself in that perspective of re-enchanting the world, sometimes I have to use specialized language because English is so common and has been so decanted of all of its mystery language.
Mhm.
That it's really hard for me to connect sometimes with English as a liturgical language, or just as a language that communicates something special.
Yeah. No, and that makes perfect sense.
And I say this as somebody who like regularly writes sacred poetry and prayers and songs in English. I don't write it in Old Norse. I can't fucking do that.
Mhm.
But I will happily insert Old Norse when and where I can.
Yeah.
But this doesn't. I'm just going to keep rolling on this then.
Please do your thing.
When it comes to like breaking apart theology and like looking at its pieces, sometimes you have to do that after you've actually experienced pieces of the theology, because trying to figure out an experience in the middle of it isn't going to help any. It's just going to disrupt the experience and make it less experiential and more of an intellectual exercise, which isn't the point. But also, thinking and hashing out your theology before you get into situations where you're having these experiences is also really important, because it gives you at least a basis of comparison. I have dealt with people who've had massive spiritual experience but no context, and they don't know what the fuck they're looking at, and they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And I don't mean that as a put down. I mean that they literally are coming to me as a spirit worker going, what the fuck did I experience? And I have to help them piece together what they experienced. It makes your life so much easier if you can at least have a ground to compare, as opposed to I have nothing and my mind got blown off its hinges.
Yeah. And even speaking as someone grounded in deconstruction who is very used to swimming in void, right? Like, and I don't mean void as in like primordial void. I mean like, no, like I take things as they come,
Sure.
deconstruct meaning. No, if I have nothing to compare this to, I can't make meaning out of it. And that's what a lot of this is making meaning. It's not that meaning is inherent to these things, it's that I am making meaning out of them.
Right. Also, I can tell a creation story a million times. I am never going to tell it the same way twice.
Yes.
Because not only am I communicating something differently, whether it's myself picking something important out of that particular story, or the gods saying, emphasize this, and what you might get out of the experience might be something totally different.
And probably will be.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Because we're not the same people. And if we are, this is weird fucky territory. But just on the baseline of experiencing aspects of theology, you have to kind of put it through your personal meat grinder and figure out what the sausage tastes like after the fact.
Yeah.
Because you can't sit there and taste the sausage until you cooked it, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can,
you
but
can.
that's like
that's how you get. And this is why metaphor is hard.
Yep. I remembered what I was going to say
previously. Go for it, please.
So this is kind of getting back to liturgical languages and how communication happens, right? There's also communication where you might use words that you don't that don't work for you for the sake of communication. For example, through this whole episode, I've been using the word gods. And increasingly, through force of habit, I still do, but increasingly, I don't use the word gods in my personal practice, and I don't think of the word gods when I am thinking of the beings that I'm interacting with,
Right.
because it doesn't. I have not found a use of the word God that separates from the word spirit in a meaningful way that doesn't contradict directly and expressly the experiences that I have with him, and also directly and expressly itself. Um, like I have not found a logically consistent and experience either a logically consistent or a spiritually consistent definition of the word God. I haven't found it. If it exists, and I'm sure that it does, I haven't found it. So I don't use the word in my practice. I just use spirits because it works better in the language that I use.
Right. So I think it's important to point out the way that I use gods is basically the big spirits that I worship.
Mhm.
And the term that I usually use is cosmologically significant. And that cosmologically significant scales up and down.
And I know that definition from you, and I'm like, I'm glad that definition works for you. That is way
And
too fucky for me. It does not work for me.
which is totally fine. But like even the folks of us that are using terms like I'll use Mikkel Vetar,
Mhm.
which means big or mighty spirit when I'm talking about the oldest ancestor,
Mhm.
which is fire for me. I will use the term Mikkel Elder Vetar because it communicates that this is a big, powerful spirit and it's an elder spirit. And that may not work for everybody. It might
Mhm.
be too much of a mouthful, or it might be just that doesn't communicate. Okay,
Cool.
just call it a spirit, then that's fine.
Yeah. And it's like for me, the pack spirits in,
Hmm.
if you were to one them, which you shouldn't, but if you were to one the pack spirits over to heathenry, they would be gods.
Yep.
They would be on par with.
Which is how
Oh,
when you had me write prayers for them, that's how I was treating them.
exactly. But they have never used the word gods for
Nor
themselves.
would I ever expect them to.
Exactly. Right. To me, they have. I say the pack spirits. I don't say the pack gods. I say the pack
Right.
spirits. Why? Because that's how they express themselves to me. And so experientially, spirits. That's what it is. And definitionally, what is a god? It's a supernatural being. It is that which is invoked,
Right.
is that which is offered to. Okay, cool. I'm doing that to an ancestor who died 2 generations ago, as
Right.
much as I am to Angrabotha, right?
So this is where the expression of theology is really fun, because theology is basically the intellectual exercise of intellectualizing the spiritual experience so that you can communicate with some other motherfuckers.
Hmm.
Because if it's all internal, then communicating it with other people may or may not matter at all.
Hmm.
But theology is a way of information sharing,
Yeah.
and it is a way of also discerning. Because if you can't tell me that's a god, that's a fucking problem.
Yeah.
Because if you can't speak the language that I'm speaking well enough to say this is a one-to-one equivalent, I don't call this a god. It never called itself a god, but in your system, it's a god. If you can't tell me that, we have a communication problem.
Yeah. And I think that is that is genuinely a living problem. Take for example, Shinto. Really, like take for
No,
example,
shit's complex, y'all.
it is extremely complex. But Shinto, as we as Westerners think of it as a religious system, but it was not, like the idea of religion was entirely foreign to the Japanese people. Shinto was so inherently ingrained in the culture, whether or not putting aside the theology, because genuinely I don't know Shinto or Japanese culture well enough to tell you anything about their theology, but putting that aside, the idea that separating religion from culture was possible was such a foreign idea that they didn't know what the hell these Western colonizers were talking about when they said, "What is your religion?" It
So,
wasn't until Western concepts of religion were imported to Japan that Shinto separated from the culture of Japan.
so two things. We're going to have a Shinto priest come onto our show for around Grandfather Fire
Oh, sweet.
uh, in
That's
May, I believe. So I'm fucking excited for this because I get to ask them all those stupid Westerner questions.
super exciting.
But the other thing too is that even in a religion which supposedly only had spirits, there's also named gods who are recognized as these big kami. Okami, I think is what they're called.
Yes.
Like Susanoo, for instance, or Amaterasu, or a whole boatload of specifically Hindu gods that got imported, and Buddhist bodhisattvas. And yeah, they kind of got turned into kami, I guess is probably the easiest way to put it. And kami just means spirit. And kami can be a forest, it can be a blade of grass, it can be the sun.
Right. And I think that's closer to my understanding of the divine, is that while there is a difference in scale, there is not a difference in significance, if that makes
Right.
sense.
The underlying substance is, if not the same, then close enough.
Exactly.
And honestly, that's really my perspective on spirits in general, whether you apply the name God to them or not.
Yeah. And so, like, in terminology, in speaking with other people, I will use the word God, and through force of habit, I do use it in my own practice. But that's not how I think of it. And the thing that drives the thing that causes the most disagreements when I am talking with other people on theology is that I think this applies to flesh and blood humans as well as it does to anyone else.
Yep.
I think that distinguishing ourselves from the divine, not in a "oh, all is one" way, because I mean that kind of applies, and there's certainly something to that. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that we are made of the same stuff as the gods, as far as I can tell. Is there a difference in scale and fallibility? Yeah, probably.
Spheres of influence, absolutely.
But as far as the base things that we are, no, I don't think that there is a significant difference between us.
What I find really interesting is that just a cursory look that I've taken at Kemetic and Greek religious ideas on this regard is that the stuff that the gods are made of and the stuff that we're made of is, if not identical, so similar that in different myths we are looked at as threats or possible replacements for the gods, depending on what culture you're talking about at what point in time.
Mhm.
But long story short is that in most polytheist cultures, we were looked at as having similar, if not same capacity to excel into a being which could easily be called a god. Now, generally speaking, when you have humans that bridge the gap, they have to die first. Because for some reason this body gets in the way of shit for whatever theological reason they happen to say. But
although interestingly, that's not always the case.
It is not. It is not. I want to really emphasize that. But like the ones that I'm thinking about are Antinous, which is Hadrian's lover.
Mm-hmm.
The various people who drowned in the Nile would have been deified and worshipped. The various kings of Norway or chieftains of Norway that were seen as especially lucky or especially powerful might have had divine or semi-divine status. Many of these guys were looked at as gods of God's children, whether Othin or Thora or
Yngvi Freyr was very often
Yngvi Freyr, like the Swedes, the Yngveons, the Swedes especially were said to be children of Freyr.
This is particularly common also in Anglo-Saxon England, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah, and this idea is pretty common. You see it also in Kemetic. Pharaohs were said to be, at least at certain points in time, were said to be divine beings in flesh.
Right. There's also the living gods of various cultures around the world that I cannot at the moment think of.
Yeah. And there's a lot of mythology, and granted, it is mythologized, but there is a lot of mythology of a god becoming incarnate in order to perform X thing, right?
Right.
You see that the most famous example, obviously, being Jesus as the Christian God becoming incarnate in order to perform X thing. But that's certainly not the only example. There are examples of that kind of all over the world.
Vishnu, Shiva were said to have various physical avatars at different points in history.
There's also examples in Mongolia. There's a particularly famous myth cycle about a shaman, or kind of the first shaman, coming down,
Mhm.
being one of their most powerful um, fingers, coming down to do various things, right?
Right.
Um, and so you see it kind of both ways, both the gods incarnating and humans um,
Ascending to godhood in
ascending,
some fashion.
right?
Or
Apotheosis.
descending.
Or descending, right? Depending. If apotheosis were not, if apotheosis is possible, then the distinction between humans and gods is not nearly so great as many people would believe.
Right.
Uh,
And I think this is where, again, theology provides us a way of discerning meaning, not necessarily of saying this is the final answer.
Correct.
Especially if you take a pluralist stance on things where a multitude of possibilities may be correct, even if you're not fully sold on one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is where the value of people in different traditions talking with each other is incredibly important, because just because we may not agree on the particulars, it doesn't mean that we don't have things to learn from each other. And this is where cultural appreciation and cultural borrowing comes into play a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Because theologically speaking, you might relate to this as a spirit and I might relate to this as a god, but that doesn't mean either one of us is wrong. It means that our relationship patterns might just be different.
Yeah. Um, and it's also particularly interesting when multiple, I find at least, it
Oh,
to be
goddamn.
particularly interesting when multiple. I really need to try that. I'm gonna try and grab my hands on. They've also got a dragon's milk version of a red ale that's in the
Ooh.
stores. I'm gonna have to grab my hands on that too.
So one of the ones that comes to mind as an example of this is Hagar which is Old Man Thor, which is worshipped specifically by different Sami peoples,
I've not
or
heard.
was. So it's something that's noted that I was reading through Our Troth Volume 2, which is all about like the gods. Like the first one's history, the second one's about the gods, and it's one of the names that they gave to Thor, because there's cultural borrowings between Old Norse and the Sami people at various points in time. Actually, one of the things that was noted in the sources was to go Finfara, or to go faring over to the Finns, which is what they called the Sami at the time. It is now a derogatory term. Please don't use it, but I'm using this as a historical example. But
Good to know.
to go to the Sami people and learn from a Nuadi to do shit, or they suspect it's the Nuadi you're learning how to do Sather from.
Hmm.
Uh, so there was cultural borrowings all the time between these two groups. So on some of these shaman drums that they have for the Nuadi, suddenly this guy with an axe and a hammer starts appearing. And they called him something that translates to Old Man Thor.
Hmm.
And this is a absolutely, I love it. I eat it up. This kind of cultural borrowing, this kind of cultural, not even borrowing, just like cultural communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they didn't borrow Thor. It's not like we're going to take him for a couple of centuries and then give him back later. They experienced Thor in their own way.
Yep.
I mean, you call, Thunor, Proquunos, Perquos, if you want to go to Pi, Thor, Thunor.
Yep. And this actually also gets into a thing that Snow, who's asking most of these questions, was asking us about, is where do we draw the line between synonyms, individual beings, and right? Where's the linguistic line between, oh, these are cognates and these are individual beings?
I default to they're all individual beings, because I would rather be wrong, or at least mistaken, than to cause offense.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in the same boat, and also because language and culture are very significant to understanding, right? Like,
So, Kat suggested adoption. I suppose adoption would be
yeah,
well,
actually a good.
yeah, yeah,
Now, but here's the question: is Old Man Thor to the Sami the same being as Thor to the Norse that they were borrowing from? That's a good question, and one I don't have an answer to. I
I
tend to
don't.
say, in this case, I would tend to say they're the same being translated through different cultural contexts. But on the flip side, I would also say that Woden, Odin, and Wotan are completely different beings.
Correct. I agree. I agree. Even though they're cognates.
Yeah. And I say that because, from a linguistic and cultural standpoint, I say that because linguistically and culturally, these, while they may be cognates, the
Mhm.
differences between the language and cultures would be significant enough that I do not think the understanding of the god would be the same.
Like straight up, their myths are different.
And also straight up, yeah, like their myths are different, right? They occupy different spaces culturally and linguistically. Even if they're close, they would be different. And also experientially, I've experienced them as different beings.
Right. Well, like historically speaking, the Anglo-Saxons never poked out the eyes of Odin or Woden. Excuse me.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, to what I understand, the thing that actually like lets you know a thing is Odin specifically is you make it with two perfectly good eyes and you destroy one of them.
Hmm.
Ooh, this is good.
So
Go
Josie
ahead.
says, so the idea of each child seeing their father slightly differently versus each child being in the same family but not the same. Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Um, or another example that's often given is you have Bob the trucker and Bob the trucker, and they live in completely different states, and they have the same job, but they're wildly different people.
Yep.
Um, one is Robert and one is actually named Bobby. Yeah, they both go by Bob. They're still completely different people. They live two states over. They might be very similar, but they're still different people. Um, yeah, it's an interesting question and not one that has a definitive or easy answer by any stretch of the imagination, especially when you get into the idea that gods will fill in for each other. And you see this both theologically and mythically. The example that jumps to mind for me
Hmm.
is Loki borrowing Freya's falcon cloak. In that moment, Loki is being Freya. He
Right.
is fulfilling the role of Freya. He was assuming her cloak. He is assuming her mantle in a both literal and metaphorical sense, right?
Right.
Um, or in the when Thor's hammer is stolen and he dresses up as Freya, right? He is quite literally becoming Freya for all intents and purposes
Purposes. Yeah.
for a large portion of that myth. Now, is that all tongue in cheek and there's a whole thing with that? Yeah, there's a whole thing with that, and that's part of the myth is playing with that idea. Um, but this is a thing that we see kind of theologically is that gods can fill in for each other, right? This is where the idea of God of X really falls apart. Is well,
Right.
no, that's not really a thing. At least it wasn't a thing as understood by the cultures of the time.
Well, like in the case of like the Merseburg charm,
Hmm.
Othin is the one that ends up healing Fall's horse's leg. Fall being possibly Boulder. Um, but also Synthgunt and her sisters and a couple of other beings try to heal uh, Balder or Fall's horse. It doesn't mean that they stopped being healing gods. It just means that in this particular instance, Odin was the one that got the horse healed. It doesn't mean that because you know Othin was the healer in this particular charm that Air stopped being a goddess of healing.
Yeah.
This is where having an understanding of history when you're reading historical texts of the possible biases of the people that are taking in this myth, and also just being open to, this isn't how the gods have come to me.
Yeah.
This isn't how the gods have come to this person or that person. Maybe in this particular case, Othin was really good at healing and Air was having an off day. Who knows?
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes back to the plurality thing, right? Is that
Right.
all of these interpretations can be true at once.
Right.
And that for the same person across different points in time, right?
If somebody was to ask me, like, the god of thing is a problem, but if somebody says, hey, I need a goddess or a god or somebody for healing, I'm not going to point them to Odin off the rip.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to point them to Air or Mengloth.
Yeah.
Not because Othin doesn't have those abilities, but that's when I think of healing, I think of those two gods and not Odin first.
Yeah. And this is also where you get into, though, the idea of the god of anything can be the god of everything to the devotee, right?
Correct.
So you think of one of the kind of classic examples of this is, who's the god of the internet? Well, you can make an argument for a lot of different gods, but one of the more interesting ones is Thor. In the common parlance, and there's very good reason why this is not true, and I'll get into that in a second. But in the common parlance, Thor is not thought of as a very intellectual god. He's very often thought of as the dumb god.
Fucking irritating.
Super irritating and patently false, but let's run with that as a thought experiment for just a second. Right?
Lane.
Yeah. But let's,
for those who aren't understanding the reference, watch Serial Experiments Lane. Anyway,
yeah,
please continue.
So you've got the internet. Well, how do you access the internet? Computers. How are computers powered? Right. What makes the computer run? Well, electricity. What is Thor the god of? Well, he's the god of thunder. What is thunder and lightning? Well, it's just electricity, right? Therefore, Thor, thunder, lightning, electricity, the internet. So Thor is the god of the internet. Is it a bit of a stretch? Maybe. Does the Thor is a dumb jock not work because literally one of his titles is Deep Thinker? Yes. It's
right. When you're not getting your theology from Marvel, you get to have deeper thinky thoughts.
Well, yes. And also, like, and that's the thing is the.
Incidentally, since we're talking about thinky thoughts, I'm changing to a different drink called Old Shuck London Style Porter by North Pier. The can is what caught my eyes.
Yeah,
for obvious reasons. It's from North Pier Brewing Company in Benton Harbor. I have no idea what the ABV is. Oh, it's 5%. So this shouldn't just factor too much. But anyway, please continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you've got both. Hey, this god might specialize in that, but also the god of anything can be the god of everything to the devotee, and both of these things are true at once, right? As polytheists, we can go to as many gods as we need to for whatever specialized thing that they might be particularly adept at, or they might be responsible for it. On the flip side, if I have a particularly close relationship with someone, I'm going to go to them when I need help. And, Angrabotha may not be in the myths associated particularly with healing, but you know what? If I'm sick and I'm close with her, that's who the hell I'm going to.
Right. And with Othin, like, it's perfectly acceptable to go to him for everything you want. It's also perfectly acceptable to go, I'm not coming to you with this. I think that I need to go to some, like, mythologically speaking, Othin isn't a doctor, right?
Yeah.
Mythologically speaking, you want to go to Aaron Mengloth because they're the fucking doctors. And it is okay to be like, the god of thing is bullshit, but like also those motherfuckers have more qualifications than you do.
Well, and here's the fun thing for me when I talk with people about this. Okay, assume even that the god of thing is not bullshit, that it is the god of thing.
Sure.
Okay. Cool. So I am going to the god that I am closest with, and that is not their domain. Not their domain at all. They don't deal with that. They are still a person and can go talk to that other god and say, hey, My devotee came to me. They're having a problem. Can you help them? Cool. It's
Right.
not like these relationships are only one-to-one. You're talking to everyone in a certain sense. Much like if you call me and say, "Hey, I need help with a thing," I can be
Right.
like, "I don't know shit about that, but you know who I do know? I do know this person, and that is their area of expertise."
Right. Right.
You know, um,
This kind of gets into something that Snow was talking about. I've pinned it. So linguistically, you have the active and the passive voice, the doer and the thing done. Like I eat an apple. An
mhm,
apple is eaten by me. In terms of literary analysis, an active agent progresses the narrative. An active agent is catalyst. Flour and milk just sit there until yeast is involved. Conflicts arise when two or more active agents collide and creates tension or drama. Two snooker balls, I have no idea what the fuck this is. It's supposed to be an English thing. Two snooker balls collide and either halt at the point of contact, shatter, or move in a third direction. I'm assuming this is this like billiards?
yeah.
Anyway,
Snooker is a form of billiards. Yes.
okay. A passive ball is hit by an active one pushed in the direction the active one moves it towards. If this is in reference to my comments regarding Tyr and Fenrir, the active agent is the one following through progressing events, the one making the sacrifice and teaching a lesson, or the one seeing odes are kept and teaching a lesson. It's something you see regarding ritual and prayer a lot. If the gods are passive presences, is that because we're left to it or because they don't care? If they're actively around and involved, then is it selective? Are they working at a bigger scale than we can comprehend, et cetera, et cetera? So I think potentially the god is the active agent and the passive agent, and context is important.
Yes. Context is important. I tend to lean towards the theology of the gods as active, but I also really lean towards theologies where gods are not omnipotent and are beholden to universal laws that are passive.
Right, right. Like Earther, for instance, or weird is a passive theological idea because what it's doing is it's being woven,
Yeah, and
and
that's
but
kind
it
of
puts
the
all of us in the driver's seat in this particular.
yeah. And some people may have a faster, more powerful car than others, but we're all still in the driver's seat of our own particular cars. We
Right.
still are bound by the laws of the road, both the social construct laws and also the laws of physics. Um, but we're all still in the driver's seat. That's the theology that I lean towards. I know other people who don't. Snow, for
Mhm.
example, I know leans much more towards omnipotent gods. Uh,
And I just don't because it doesn't rock for me,
it doesn't grok for me either, but that doesn't make either one correct, right?
and it doesn't make Snow wrong.
Exactly.
Right.
Um,
Just really quick, I want to highlight a couple of comments. I've heard it referred to as a god wearing another god's hat. It's been
yeah,
stated like God A as God B, whereas God A is taking on the role of one of the roles of the hat of God B.
yep,
This is a popular form of theology and Platonism, where uh, um, Athena is taking on the wisdom of Zeus, or as an
mhm,
expression of the wisdom of Zeus, and vice versa. That Zeus is the active component in the martial prowess that Athena exerts because she has wisdom personified. Um, and my migraine brain already one god going to another devotee. This bitch is issues. Can you help? Like honestly, sometimes I'm sure Odin's been like has gone to Freya and was like, "Look, this motherfucker."
look, this motherfucker. Can you please? I cannot today. Um, yeah. Can I see that happening? Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, so I tend to lean towards active uh, and limited gods. I know a lot of people who don't. And but speaking of
Limited in the sense not of access, but in terms of
not omnipotent, right? Bound by universal laws. Um, uh, and I know other people who are also just as heathen as I am, who go the other way, go towards omnipotent gods. And I would argue with those people about things like the problem of evil and whether or not that applies.
theodicy is a fun topic.
Yeah, right. Like it's complicated and nuanced, and none of us are wrong. We're all just debating shit. Why? Because we find it fun. Um, is
Honestly,
it important? I think so, but like,
it's existentially important if you understand your gods to be omnipotent, omniscient, and or omnibenevolent, because that means that reality is a gaslight at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I fall down is if reality exists, well then omnipotent and omniscient gods can't, but that's not the point.
Unless you admit they are fucking evil, in which omnibenevolence is an impossibility.
Yeah. Um and in that case you get into mesotheism, in which I'm not willing to get into. Because I'm not willing to call my gods evil because I like them.
Right. But it's the problem that a lot of omnis lead to by dint of the implication of, if this being is omniscient, then either.
Yeah. And there are
This is not like something we're going to like solve in an evening, because
absolutely.
this has literally been bitched about and argued about and fist fought over for tens of thousands of years.
Yeah. And please don't misunderstand. While I tend towards these things because I think that they are better solutions, there are solutions to these problems, right? There are solutions to the problem of evil in monotheism. I think those are particularly bad, but there are also much better
Absolutely.
I think there are much better solutions that are polytheist, that still hold omnipotent gods.
honestly, I think polytheism sidesteps most of this shit much more efficiently than any other religious. Polytheism and animism tend to sidestep this really well, just by basis of being polytheist.
I think so too. I don't think it's immune to it. I think some people claim
Ah,
that
fuck no.
polytheism is immune to it, and I think that that's
No,
falsehood.
no, 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 no.
But I think that there are polytheisms that have omnipotent gods as part of their theology that do
Right.
work, and I think that they still do need to address the problem of evil, but I think that they do it adequately well. Do I adhere to
Right.
those? No, they aren't satisfactory to me, but that doesn't mean that they don't work.
Right, right, right.
Um, and that kind of omnipotence thing is also why I tend towards active gods, and also why I flatly don't have an answer as to whether the gods are selective or non-selective in their activity. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, okay, so like we can drill down like theology all we want to, like, and it comes down to stuff like, is this a worthy offering? Well, okay, what's worth?
Yeah.
What's worthy? Like when you're digging into language that fine, at the very least, you're fucking thinking.
Yeah.
Like whatever else, I might completely disagree with you on your conclusions, but at least you are actively fucking thinking about what you're offering and why.
Yeah. At least you like even if we come to full on knockdown drag out, I do not agree with you on this. I
I
would
will fucking
rather
fist fight you.
but I would rather you do that than not think at all.
Right.
Flatly. Right? Like
So like the drink that I'm drinking now, which is Old Shuck, it's like a 5% porter. It's fucking tasty. It's got this little legend that goes along with it. Old Shuck, the deep dark brew, is an ode to Old Shuck, the ghostly demon dog that roamed the countryside in 16th century England.
hmm,
Big coffee-like aroma, perfectly with a late addition of earthy English hops, making the perfect roasty ale to drink all year round. Um, I would consider this a worthy gift to Odin.
mhm.
And somebody might like sniff the air on this and go, "What in the fuck is wrong with you?" And at that point, it's a question of, are we disagreeing about theology, or are we just disagreeing about taste?
Yeah.
And this is where having a solid grounding in the theology that you're part of is important, because if you can discern theology from taste, that's where you know your shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this my aesthetic is a different question than, is this a good offering?
Yeah. And that's not to say that aesthetic is not important. There are plenty of things that are
Right.
perfectly worthy offerings that I don't offer. Why? Because I don't want to.
Tangent for maybe another time. Can you follow, practice, learn, pack tradition, and not adhere to animism? I don't think so, but I'm
I
not part of
don't
the
think so
tradition.
either. You're not part of the tradition. I am. I would say this episode is deep. Tequila is needed, says Jason. I more power to you. Tangent
Good
for
luck.
maybe I want to go back to that because I really want to dig into that
No,
for a
no, no,
second.
no, no. Here, I'll just show it on the
Yeah.
screen there.
Can you follow, practice, learn, pack tradition, and not adhere to animism? I think that the degree of animism is potentially up for debate, but I don't think that you can be entirely non-animist. And be part of this tradition. I think that at least a significant degree of animism is inherent to the tradition.
Mhm.
I think that you could potentially have debate as to whether inanimate um, objects have spirits, right? Things that maybe perhaps I could see an argument where someone in the tradition could say things that do not have biological life are not animate. Um, but even that, I would say I don't tend to. No, you can't. No, you fucking can't.
Right, because
Because Earth and
Earth
Sky
and Sky.
and Hunt and Silence and Howl.
I was gonna say, like, most of your pack spirits are literally personifications of non-animate forces.
Yeah, no, I tell a
They
lie.
are the inanimate made animate.
Yeah, no, I don't think that you can have you could maybe make some distinctions on like size of thing.
Like,
But
and
that's
I think there's a
logically
difference between somebody who's fucking fence sitting because they're not quite comfy with animism. But if you're in pack tradition, you're initiated.
yeah.
And there's a difference between somebody who's fence setting as a heathen versus somebody who's in an initiated magical tradition.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of
Not to speak for your tradition, please excuse me.
Oh no, you're correct though. Is that's the thing is like
I know I'm correct, but I'm also not trying to speak for the tradition.
you're fine. I understand where you're coming from. But no, like you're correct though. It's one of those at a certain point when Earth or Sky, the personifications of the atmosphere around us and the ground under our feet drag you kicking and screaming into experiential things that cannot be put into words. You either believe that they exist as animate spirits or you don't. And
Right.
if you don't, then you need to go to a psych hospital. And I hope that you get the help that you need. And if you do, then cool, I'm here to help you explain things.
Right. And I mean, the thing with, yes, all of that. The thing with theology is, I really want to say again, it is a way to express the ideas of spiritual experience such that you can communicate them effectively to other people. What it's not supposed to be used is as a club. What it's not supposed to be used as is as a way of puffing yourself up or making yourself seem more than. The purpose of theology is communication in the same way that religion is about relationship.
Yeah. And I think a good metaphor for this is theology and science are the same thing addressing different topics. Um, and I say this as a professional scientist.
No,
Science,
I agree. I agree because the point of terminology and verbiage in science is to effectively and accurately communicate ideas.
yeah, and scientific theories and all of that. What that is theoretical frameworks that change with evidence and explain the world around us in theoretically and logically consistent ways. But what those are based on is the experiential, the experimental data. The
Right.
A scientific theory explains theoretically the occurrence of scientific data. It's not it's
Right.
not this thing that you believe and then you go find the data to support it. Sometimes that does happen and that's bad science. And I'll say that professionally. But
Well, it's
really,
also like it's also bad theology to have an experience and then say it must fit this particular framework or else it's wrong.
yeah,
Because what you're doing at that point is no different than a scientist searching for a theory that explains the phenomena they want to see. If what you experience is Othin coming to you and tapping you on the forehead saying, all right, let's get to work, and what you choose to do with that information is instead of accepting the experience for what it is you over intellectualize it into, well, I just want to feel special. That's not to say that you're necessarily wrong in that interpretation. You might want to feel fucking special. There's nothing inherently wrong with that desire to feel special. But what also is the flip side of that is self denigration to the point of where I could never be chosen to do a thing.
yeah.
And I
And I
will outwardly, flatly refuse to accept the reality of what I've experienced.
Yeah. And I think that there is a fine line here because I do think discernment is important, right? If you get an experiment that throws back data that disagrees with the theory of evolution, I'm going to question your experiment. I'm going to say, are you sure?
Right.
And right, if your single experiment with a n or a subject number of 5 people disagrees with 100 years of data supporting a thing, I'm going to say, are you sure?
Well, it's like
Or
somebody that
you
wants to. That's like somebody that wants to refute psych data from double-blind psych testing with anecdotal case studies.
yeah, right. Like,
No, these are
no,
not the same fucking thing. Case studies can be useful. They can be groundbreaking, but they are not double-blind studies.
yeah, right. Like it's as it, and on the same on along the same lines, if someone tells me that they had an experience of Odin coming to them and saying, I am here to establish worldwide peace, and you are my messenger to spread the word of peace throughout the world and ultimate pacifism, and do not even defend yourself. I'm going to look at them and say, you did not experience Odin. I'm sorry,
Yep.
you did not.
Because the theology that undergirds the experience doesn't match.
Exactly. And so there is a line to be walked between, you know,
Yeah.
testing your experience against theology and testing your theology against experience. And both of these things are important.
Well, this is where like orthodoxy and orthopraxy, and I know a lot of pagans really fucking hate those words, but they are two sides of the same coins. You cannot have an orthopraxic religion without having orthodoxy in some fashion, shape, or form. And the orthodoxy doesn't even have to be that tightly held. It can be just the gods are worthy of offerings. The gods are worthy of worship. We possess the same inimitable qualities as the gods. That can be your orthodoxy. That
Yeah.
that can be the box. That's it.
Yeah.
And the orthopraxy is what's built around the box.
Well, and I think the thing that gets people with orthodoxy versus orthopraxy is that people orthodoxic religions, you can stop at the doxy, you can stop at the belief. You don't have to do the thing. The thing with orthopraxic religions is that it's I'm even disagreeing with myself as I speak. It's you do need, I won't say need. The best case scenario in an orthopraxic religion is orthodoxy and orthopraxy, and they support each other.
Sure.
But in community, in a pluralistic uh, idea of religion, it matters less if an individual at a given time has correct thought than if they have correct action.
I will actually, as somebody who deeply identifies with the understanding of orthodoxy and orthopraxy are mutually supportive, I will agree with that 9 inches out of 10.
Yeah.
In no small part because the orthopraxy leads you in one way, shape, or form to the orthodoxy, but also because I'm not in your fucking kindred.
Yeah.
Like, I don't give a flying shit how the average heathen kindred conducts itself.
Well, and even say within a given kindred,
Sure.
every single person at a ritual does not need to believe 100% of the time.
No. Hell, I don't.
Exactly. I have full days, weeks, months where I'm like, is this real? Have I deluded myself? I have no fucking idea.
My existential crises usually doesn't hit that level, but what it will occasionally hit is this kind of, well, if the gods aren't fucking real, I haven't wasted my time.
Yeah. That's what I end up coming down to, is that if everything that I have done with my religion is not objectively true and is only a psychological exercise that has made me feel better about myself,
well, goddamn, better than what I was doing.
Right. The other option is things that I have to provide trigger warnings for because they can trigger other people to do the same thing, and they
Do we need
involve
to go
me.
there?
No. Well,
Okay.
they involve me not being on the show anymore forever. So like,
understood.
Yeah, like, very truly, religion has saved my life more than once.
Well, I mean, like, religion, like, literally supported you cracking your egg.
Also true. Religion informed my gender identity and expression. Yeah, like, and that's a flat out, that's an improvement to my life. As much as being trans in the United States right now is awful, um, and I actually very genuinely nearly lost my career because I am trans. At the same time, I wouldn't trade it.
No, but you're living your life out loud and proud, and that is
As much as I can with being
as
safe.
much as you. Well, just
Yeah.
take the fucking compliment, asshole.
No. Yeah. No, you're as much as I can while being safe. And it's important for me to acknowledge that because I am it's important for me to acknowledge that publicly because I am very cis passing and very straight passing.
Oh,
Um,
trust.
and like it's important for me to acknowledge that because while very legitimately I nearly lost my career straight up due to transphobia, um, on the
Sure.
flip side, I do have the option of not saying that, right? If I do not acknowledge that I am trans to a stranger, they will not assume that I am trans.
Right.
And that makes a significant difference for how I live my life. Is that
Right.
its own kind of fucked up trauma? Absolutely. Uh,
Sure.
but there are nuances to this conversation that are worth being open about.
But I mean, the thing about an open and inclusive theology such as we have, and I will say that we in terms of, we share a heathen theology which is accepting of gender expression and diversity, which is accepting that we're not all going to fit the same mold, and that each of our earth unfolds in a certain way that is sacred unto ourselves, and yet is also tied in with community. I think that that's a beautiful and shining thing, because you can be your own individual thread in this great tapestry and still be as equally sacred as another.
Yeah.
And I really, for me, the thing about theology that makes me so impassioned about it, and that I can sit here and probably keep going for another 2 hours because we're almost at the 2 hour mark.
Yeah.
Um, what makes me so impassioned about it is because, like, I see what positive, healthy theology does to people, and I also see what really negative theology does to people.
Yeah.
And 9 inches out of 10, I'm going to say that polytheist philosophy, no matter which way you find it, is going to probably be better than a lot of the anti-theist screeds or the evangelical Christian screeds you find, simply because we are accepting people for who and what they are, where they are.
Yeah. I would tend to agree. And that's not to say that there are not polytheist theologies that are absolutely toxic, because there are.
Absolutely.
Anything can be done with evil intent. But I think that polytheism as a whole tends to lend itself, by its pluralistic nature, tends to lend itself towards more positive things than other theologies might.
If for no other reason than the plurality in and of itself, it may not fix in terms of the societal issues, but at least gives more rise to more equitable solutions within the milieu
Yeah,
that
I
is
would.
found within polytheism and cultures at large that embrace it.
Yeah. All right. So I am going to say, either because I desperately need to pee, either I need to take a bio break real quick so I can grab a drink and pee real quick, or we should call the episode and I leave that in your hands.
I think that for the amount we've imbibed and for the amount that we've talked, I think we're good. I
Okay.
really appreciate everybody who stuck with us to this point. I had a whole fucking thing here. I have literal pages worth of notes that I didn't even get to yet.
Oh yeah, no,
So
we're gonna do probably at least a part
this is
two and
probably maybe
probably
a
a part
part
three to this
3.
episode.
Yeah,
Like,
I didn't even whip out my book, and I have fuckloads of notes in this thing.
yeah, like
So
we have a lot that we want to talk about still. So there will be more to. I think we will probably do a theology part 2, and honestly, very likely a theology part 3 episode in the coming months. But thank you everyone so much for sticking with us so far. I know I will be, and I believe
Mhm.
probably Sarenth will be, at least to some degree, in the after party on the Discord.
I'll be there. I just got to do night purse.
Yep. And I gotta pee and grab another drink. So we'll see you there.
You need to eat, motherfucker.
Oh, I should also consume calories. That's a good idea. That are not liquid.
I love you, Jesus fucking Christ.
I forget things. I have ADHD.
I know. I get it.
Yep.
So,
Anyway,
everybody who's listening, thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for following us on this rambly, drunk ass journey. Theology and terminology is much better when you have a couple of drinks in you.
it really is. And frankly, that was the point of this freaking podcast, is for us to
Right?
talk about shit over a drink. So yes,
Yeah.
I
Crab
will
food, Maleck.
I will grab food, Emily. And
So
see you all
blessings
in
to
the
you
after
all.
party. Love you all, and see you then. Bye.
That's the hell.